Today we'll be presenting motivation. So, starting off, motivation can be defined as why a person decides to do a certain thing. It is at the same time the initiator, the guide, and the maintainer of any goal oriented behavior. It has often been separated into categories of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, that is, whether the gratification is personal or for other people's recognition. Motivation has also been subcategorized into three parts: activation, which is the initiation of a process, persistence, which is continuing to progress towards a goal despite the obstacles, and finally, intensity, which is how much concentration and effort is placed in the achievement of the goal. There are also many theories of motivation, which is what we will be looking at this evening, starting off with the need reduction theory. So, it's also called drive reduction theory, and this was developed by Clark Hull in the 1940s. So he believed that all human behavior is explainable by classical conditioning, taking inspiration from the work of Ivan Pavlov or Edward L. Thorndike, for example. And this shows in the need reduction theory, the basis of which is that humans have basic physiological needs to ensure survival, such as nutrition, shelter, pain avoidance, that kind of thing. And those are primary motives. It is a deficiency in one of them that leads to a primary drive, which heightens arousal levels with the goal to fulfill a need. A primary drive, such as hunger, can cause a series of events. So you may go to the grocery store, buy your food, cook your food, eat it, and all of that is involved in the same drive. Uh, yep. So in his theory, Hall also includes reinforcement. So when a behavior leads to a satisfying outcome, like when you wrap yourself in a blanket and you feel warm as a result, the behavior is reinforced and it makes you more likely to repeat the action in the future. In this way, it intersects with the incentive theory, which suggests that people are motivated by external rewards. So, this has been used to explain, for example, why someone may feel demotivated at work or school, as if their body has been using up resources and they have gotten no recognition in the form of reinforcement during the day. They get a feeling of exhaustion, resulting in a loss of motivation, as this goes against their need for rest. The theory could be used to reduce the demotivation, for example, by offering breaks. And the theory has also been combined with drive induction theory. So this one suggests that the drive for some behaviors is not to reduce a physiological state of arousal, but to fill a need for novelty or challenge. So in the same school example, what would be needed would not be reinforcement as much as a new task to learn or a small series of challenges to resolve. So that establishes a clear purpose to the person's work to learn a new applicable skill. Of course, there are limitations to need reduction theory. So it's biologically deterministic, which means that it does not account for a behavior which is not linked directly to biological needs, like doing something out of curiosity. And it doesn't account either for behavior which goes against survival instincts. Why someone who is hungry would choose not to eat despite having a meal in front of them, or why someone who already has safety would choose to risk it by going mountain climbing, for example. And another criticism is the lack of empirical evidence. So Hull did create a mathematical formula to support his theory. However, it was criticized for being overly complex, which is why it has been separated by some into two simpler parts. So drive reduction equals internal stimulus plus response, and drive reduction equals repetition. But the criticism remains that it's still failing to fully explain human motivation, like in the food and mountain climbing examples, or in the case of overindulgence. And researchers who tried to apply this in the 1950s concluded that it did not provide valid results. And this is why the theory has vastly been discarded since the 1970s in favor of other theories which could provide explanations of aggression, complex cognitive processes, and altruism. So, yeah, on to the next theory.
I will talk about the arousal theory. Before diving into the subject, we're gonna look at some key terms like arousal theory, arousal continuum, Yerkes Dodson-Doyle, and reward deficiency syndrome. Okay, what is arousal? Arousal refers to the state of being awake and responsive to stimuli, including physiological activation and mental alertness. It is it is the motivation of organisms is basically based on their level of arousal. Low arousal is associated with boredom, low motivation and disengagement, versus high arousal is associated with anxiety, stress, and overstimulation. The arousal theory was proposed by Donald Lindsay, who suggests that there's an optimal level of arousal at which people perform their best. Too little or too much arousal can hinder their performance. In the arousal continuum that we can see in the picture, it is a scale that range the arousal levels from very low, which is sleep, to very high, which is championship game. The goal is to stay in the middle range, like sitting in class, uh, to stay to stay alert but not too stressed. This middle range is where someone performs their best. Yerkes Dodson Law theory explains the relationship between arousal and performance. It is illustrated by the inverted U function, which shows that performance improves as arousal levels increase, but only up to a certain point. Beyond that point, performance will decline. It was proposed by Robert Yerkes and John Dodson when they did an experiment by giving electrical shock to mice. When they gave weak and high shots to the mice, they didn't like perform. They didn't perform like high performance, but then they come up with this theory when they gave modern electric shot, where the mice performed their best performance. The optimal level of arousal depends also on the complexity of the task. Simple tasks like running perform better at higher result levels since they require less mental effort, versus complex tasks like solving a math problem perform better at lower arousal levels to avoid overwhelming the brain's capacity. The arousal levels is also associated with people's personality, introversion, and extroversion. Introverts tend to perform better with lower arousal due to their higher baseline arousal levels, since they're not motivated to seek out for more arousal, versus extroverts thrive in a more stimulating, high arousal environment, since they're motivated to seek out more stimulation in order to increase their level of arousal. The reward deficiency syndrome is a dysfunction in the brain reward system, which leads individuals to have a low number of type dopamine receptors in the striatum and the prefrontal cortex. So, sensation seekers, who are individuals who actively seek out high levels of arousal, like doing exciting stuff such as riding roller coasters in order to feel pleasure or satisfaction. This can lead to risky behaviors like overeating, gambling, or like with problems that are associated with self control, since like they seek intense experiences to feel good. In conclusion, arousal theory provides a framework to understand how mental and physiological states influence performance.
So the last part is pleasure seeking and reward. Dopamine plays key role in this part of motivation. So these are the keyword: primosid, prediction error, dopamine ramping, hedonic hotspot, hedonic copot. So dopamine is a monoamine and catecholamine neurotransmitter concentrated in many areas of the brain. So dopamine ramping is the way in which dopamine is released in increasing amounts as the step required to obtain a reward are completed. Dopamine is released onto neurons in nuclear accumbens during completion of a rewarding behavior. It helps train the brain to engage more to this behavior. So opposite to dopamine is epimusid, a dopamine receptor antagonist used as antipsychotic to block dopamine receptors. So prediction error is, for example, you see a friend out of nowhere, he gives you a candy, then he repeats a few times. So in the there's a spike in the reward section is a dopamine neurons increase to respond to unexpected reward. But then when you see that friend a few times, the friends become acute. Like they're bringing you a candy. So dopamine burst happens and the spike dopamine occur in the queue. So the next time when you see him again, but there's no candy, you expect there's candy, but it does not occur. So dopamine activities go down instead of back to the baseline. Um, so we have an error in prediction. So this is another example of prediction error. So the girl is making coffee, however the coffee tastes bitter or sour. So the dopamine activities go down. But the next time when she make a coffee again, she put milk and sugar, it tastes sweet, and the dopamine goes up. So reward can be stimuli, object, event. It help to positive reinforcement, approach, decision making, positive emotion, and it also drive the approach behavior. So in order to approach the reward stimuli, people and animal also have to learn to avoid painful or aversive stimuli. So incentive salience theory, it is mentioned once in chapter 3, but this is in the context of drug addiction. Incentive salience theory is about a state of wanting and liking. For example, drug addiction leads to intense craving and it leads to seeking behaviors. Wanting is generated by activity in the mesolimbic dopamine system. However, liking is associated with specific facial expression. It is related to the release of endorphins rather than dopamine. So endorphins is designated in areas of hedonic hotspot, including subcortical areas. Contrarily, disgust reactions or facial expressions were designated as hedonic cold spots. So, in conclusion, beside the need reduction theory and arousal theory, people and other organisms are also motivated by stimuli that provide pleasure. Despite of general belief that dopamine is the key for pleasure sensations, certain theories illustrate that it is not true and that dopamine is not indispensable for liking a rewarding stimulus, but instead endorphins released during this process. So thank you for listening.